surrounded by it. Thoughts when I imagine what that world looks like.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Regina, what about you?
When I think about, this world, I think about access, and how exciting it will be to extend access to others and to expand our community. When you empower a Black woman, you empower her community, her family, her church, her sorority, her school. Everything she touches gets better in some way, shape, or form. And so to me, that is very exciting when I think about the power and being empowered to access more opportunity for others.
Thank you, Regina. And I want to encourage all of you who are watching us right now, put in the chat what comes up for you. What are some of the words and emotions that come up for you as you hear this world that we just painted? Nicole, what comes up for you?
I'm excited about that because when I think about the diversity that we bring to the table and the aspects of cognitive diversity that drives and shapes innovation and allows organizations to solve really complex and difficult problems in new and unique ways, that's what I'm excited about. I had a conversation with a colleague the other day, and we were talking about how, in some ways, the things that I've done in my career, I'm a unicorn. I want to be beyond those days because you know what? It's a bittersweet moment to be a unicorn of something as a Black woman. I don't want those days to be classified and considered as a unicorn because that means that there hasn't been enough opportunity. And so when I look forward, gone are the days where we celebrate African American or Black women for being a unicorn of something. And it becomes so natural, as Erica, laid out in her response to the question.
Yes, no more unicorns. I mean, we like the vision of unicorns, but what that represents, like, oh God, it's just natural, right? It's just natural. Lizette, what about you?
Yeah, I love it. When I conjure up that thought, I think two words keep coming to mind for me, and it's everybody wins. And I love to think about this a lot of times because I'm in marketing. I look at cues in music, culture, and entertainment to figure out like what's really happening. And the best analogy that I could think of was the 2016 Super Bowl, which is the most iconic event in American history, right? And who performed at that Super Bowl was Beyonce. And she showed up as the main entertainment, unapologetically Black, in all of her glory in that moment. And the entire country stood up and celebrated that moment. And so it wasn't just a win for Black people or Black women, it was a win for everybody. And I think we've seen that. If you look at industries and other sectors, we can talk about Ursula Burns, Roz Brewer, Cassandra Duckett. Every time a Black woman is put into a leadership role, even under other industries, what we're seeing is those organizations are winning and we're seeing culture being moved forward. And so I think it's a great moment, not just for Black people or for Black women, but for the country as a whole and for the globe.
Absolutely. For the past, I don't know, years ago, I had this realization that Black women are truly the backbone of this country. When you think about the role that Black women have played, particularly in the United States, on for nurturing our leaders, every nationality, right, throughout the country's existence, the discernment that we have, the intuition that we have, the fortitude, the leadership. There is just so much that we bring, and to finally be recognized for that. Oh my goodness, I'm waiting for that day. So, we painted a picture, ladies. We painted this beautiful picture. And in the real world, will we have all companies led by Black women? Probably not. And to be fair, nor should we, right? It should not be the case that one race or one gender is leading every single company. Although that has been the case for, we won't be going there today, but I think there are some things that we can take from it, right? So let's explore some of the possibilities that do exist as we think about having more representation. And, when we think about making our industry better, the technology industry better, our organizations better, our communities better. So I would love to ask each of you some questions to get even a stronger perspective and maybe some insight around what can we do now, what can organizations and people do now to at least make some of the aspects of this utopia a reality. So Erica, when you think about the pipeline of Black women in STEM leadership, what we know to be true is that only 2% of Black women, or when you look at STEM in general, Black women only represent 2% of STEM fields. And that's not even leadership. That's STEM, period. So when you think about what we can do to impact the pipeline of Black women in STEM leadership, how early do we need to engage them? And what can we do to best equip and align them?
Yeah, Kylie, my response to your question is the sooner the better. And I've always emphasized that, and a lot of times in conversations where that's not necessarily readily accepted and it doesn't always resonate, because people have, fixated as to their particular touch points of when they want to engage or when they've decided to fund and engage, or when they've decided to bring awareness to the leadership of that particular organization about what's the appropriate time frame to engage. But to your point, and because of that statistic, the reality is if we're not intentional about starting that exposure, starting that again, that encouraging that spirit of belonging and presence and empowerment, for these very young girls. And when I say young, I'm talking like elementary. I'm talking by middle school, we're practically too late. And by high school, we actually are too late. This is why, right? When you look at the educational trajectory, when you look at the access points, the further they get along that educational pipeline, the more opportunities they actually have to opt out. And so you want them to be inspired. You want them to want to seek and learn more. You want them to be energized about what's possible. And so much of that is developed and nurtured and crafted for students at such an early age. And we've missed that in the early parts of this. And that's why I don't think, for me personally, I never feel like I can overemphasize that in terms of what we want to do, what we have to do if we're really talking about positioning a pipeline of talent. So yeah, Kylie, the answer is the sooner the better. And again, there are a lot of organizations that want to put their energy and put their money and put their volunteerism at the post-secondary stage, definitely maybe the high school stage. But again, by then students have had an opportunity to opt out. Students have had an opportunity, not, let's say they don't offer a certain set of classes in their high school, they then are not aware of how they can go online or seek out other resources, or seek out, just kind of some supplemental access from a nonprofit organization that can give them the skill sets, the knowledge that they need. And that's very critical. My alma mater, if a student doesn't come in having had calculus, that's a problem for them. They probably actually, unfortunately, are not even accepted into the school. But what does that say when a student is in a zip code where that is just simply not even offered in their high school? In essence, they're being penalized for their geography. We are now minimizing what type of opportunities they have. So yeah, the sooner the better.
Yes, and Erica, a couple of things come to mind when I hear you talk about the sooner the better. I have a 5-year-old daughter who wants to be an astronaut. And, I think about her and I see her as such a bright light and someone who is so excited. She loves to build and she's very creative as well. And I just want her to never lose that, right? I don't want her to be to be infiltrated with those messages that girls don't do those things, right? So I agree with you. The earlier the better. You also reminded me of something that we've talked about a lot with the Emerge Academy, and that is the pipeline, and noticing that in college we see many Black women go into, say, computer science, and by their sophomore junior year they change majors, and then again they're out of the pipeline, and they can never make it to the senior ranks like many of you, because they have not seen it. They don't know that they can do it. Perhaps they don't have the support. So one of actually the first cohort of the Emerge Academy, their capstone project was to create a mentorship program for women, for Black women in colleges, to give them the support from executives and professionals who look like them, to give them that encouragement. So thank you for that. So I want to hear from you next, Lizette. Over the years, you have held roles at some incredible organizations and made a tremendous impact. And particularly at Kimberly-Clark and McDonald's and now Meta, I appreciate your philosophy around targeting, or your ideas about segmenting and targeting Black consumers who, as we know, are innovators and early adopters in all things tech and culture. So how do you think companies can better gain loyalty when it comes to Black women and Black consumers in general, both as consumers on the consumer side, but also inside our organizations?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And obviously I've done this type of work at several different organizations. One of the things I've always been clear about when I go in to do this work at an organization is that this isn't about leveraging Black consumers as a target to be targeted to, right? This is not exploitive. So how do we really think about marketing and engaging and understanding that consumer through an insights-driven perspective, where it is about deep understanding, understanding the culture, understanding how to engage in a respectful manner, but not in an exploitive manner. And even bigger than that, it's not just about targeting the segment, but understanding that this segment influences and drives broad-based culture, right? Because it becomes a very small opportunity if you're thinking about 13% of the US population, which is the African-American population right now. But if you understand that 76% of Americans say that popular culture is shaped and informed by Black culture, that's a very different way to think about the opportunity, right? So in as much as it is about targeting and engaging this segment, it is much more about looking at your broader business and seeing how brand relevancy looks moving forward, and how you leverage Black consumers as the impetus of culture, and where you should be taking your business moving forward above and beyond the segment opportunity if you want to stay relevant in the eyes of the consumer. And that's how I've always looked at it. And I've done tons of campaigns a million times over on several different brands. And that ideology and that way of thinking has always worked to actually, one, do respectful advertising that I think is really, really important and not be exploitive, but two, unlock major financial gains that extends beyond the segment, which is really where we want to get to. And so that's always been the philosophy that I follow.
I love that. I mean, and there's so much that we can take from that. It even reminds me of how, when there is more diversity at the top, then you have more, like, you have a stronger bottom line, right? So it's not about being exploitive, and I really appreciate that philosophy. It's not about saying, okay, let's focus on these people. It's no, let's focus on who is influencing, who are the brand, the innovators, who are the culture shapers and makers, and that will inspire and impact and define how other people are attracted to it. So thank you for that, Lizette. And so, Regina, you operate at the intersection of Black women, tech, and entrepreneurship. And we keep hearing about the Great Resignation, but even before that, Black women were leaving corporate jobs like in droves.
Yes.
And many of them were starting their own businesses. And there is right now, I've seen so much energy put into Black women owned businesses, yet the amount of Black women with at least $1 million in funding is like tiny, tiny.
0.4%.
Thank you. 0.4, 0.4,
Point,
not
point,
4%.
right. No.
0.4%.
Yes.
So, what can we do to truly move that needle so that we have more Black women led companies with prestige and power and attention that many of their white male counterparts are getting?
How much time do we have?
Yeah, let me lean back.
Let-
Let me lean back and get comfortable on this one.
So I think that it's very, very layered, right? We have to think about multiple kinds of businesses. If Black Women Talk Tech, we focus on technology businesses. So these are scalable startups that are using technology to tap into billion-dollar markets. However, there are tons of businesses that can be created. There's lifestyle businesses, there's side hustles, there's all types of things. And mind you, all of them need to be supported. They all need their products purchased. They need to be promoted on social media. They need to be invested in. And if I double click specifically on the investment, right? So, you think about that ridiculous stat that says that 0.4, literally 0.4% of VC fund venture capital funding goes to Black women entrepreneurs. This is abysmal, given the amount of VC money that's actually in the market. Over $400 billion is in VC financial products in and of itself. And so we have to think outside of the box around how do Black women get access to funding. There are other ways. It only accounts for still 1% of all the types of financing available. So how are we thinking about crowdfunding? How are we thinking about loans? How are we thinking about angel investment, grants, public-private partnership? There's lots of ways to get this access to fundraising that will in fact allow Black women entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. Success is when preparation meets opportunity. And so it's not for lack of preparation, right? As you've already mentioned, these women are well educated. They're at the top of their fields. They're hitting glass ceilings. They're being frustrated and just really annoyed with so many microaggressions that there's, this sense of building something on your own. And so the opportunity, that's the delta that we need to solve for, providing not only financial opportunity, but also the social capital, the introductions to the right clients, the introductions to the right resources that will in fact move the needle on your business. And one other quick thing I just wanted to double click on in the previous conversation, not only are we the arbiters of culture, but when we think about the valuation, right? Black women are actually more likely to provide higher levels of return on an investor's investment. And so this also just continues to reinforce why it's so much better to bet on a Black woman. And investors, smart investors, it would behoove themselves to be able to sync up with a Black woman entrepreneur if they're interested in higher valued companies that give them outsized returns in the long run.
That part. Like,
Yeah,
we need to capture that clip and like send it out because, you hear about these VC firms who are looking at the model of tech startups, the, youngish white guy with a hoodie who, has a particular type of pedigree. And yet the return
it's higher.
comes from this right here on this screen, like higher return. So we need to look at the data. We need to, not we, because we know. We know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Whew, a lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done. So let's talk about leadership and tech leadership. So, Nicole, as someone who's been in technology leadership at the most senior ranks, there is so much I'm sure you have seen. I'm sure you have been in the only in a room more often than than you wish than any one person can count. And so when you think about what is needed for us to not only get Black women into the pipeline as we talked about, but for them to make it to the most senior ranks and stay there. What can we do, Nicole? What can we do?
I so love that question. And I want to be very clear in my response that it builds upon the things that we started out in conversation with. And so when Erica spoke about making sure that we begin building pipelines earlier in the educational cycle, I think that's a part of it. But when I look at what can organizations do, I want to address it from two different perspectives. I want to address it from an operational perspective, meaning what it's like and those things that we can do inside the organization. But I also want to address it from the highest level of an organization's management tier, from that governing board and governing body, and the role that board governance or board oversight plays in this entire shift. And so, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I want more than that as a leader in an organization. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Black woman that I deserve more than anyone else or any one of my other counterparts. But what I am saying is when we talk about diversity and inviting underrepresented women and groups in, that's great. And I think we have to have some level of intentionality and that conscious awareness. But what does it really mean to be included in an organization, right? What does it mean when organizations put in those supporting ecosystems so that way women and Black women and underrepresented women don't fall out of that pipeline in that ecosystem? And so in the same way that successes are celebrated by my counterparts and others, as a Black woman, I want to come to work. I want to be able to be my authentic self. And when an organization makes that commitment that we are going to be more diverse, that also means that we're looking at where do we have bias inserted in our processes in terms of how do we define, how do we evaluate success. And so I want to be included in building those models of how do we evaluate success. Don't just tell me if I'm successful or not. But I want more diversity in those models as we build those models and what the cultural and social norms for success are. And so I think that's one level, at an operational level, making sure that there's opportunity to be a part of that process that says, here's how we now evaluate success because we're more diverse. And I know that we're wrapping up our panel discussion shortly, but I feel that it's very important to talk about governance of corporations. And so when we diversify our boards, the level of cognitive diversity that we bring into organizations, I think is so important. And I think it's that cognitive diversity that allows a governing body and a board to be more in touch with their stakeholders, not just shareholders, right? And so when I think about stakeholders, that's your employees, that's partners, that's community, and how you support those investment choices to support your stakeholders. That happens at the highest level of organizations in their governing bodies, in their governing boards, when they make decisions around how they're going to invest in stakeholders.
Thank you, Nicole, for that because it is so important. Today we've talked about, start them as early as possible, right? In K through 12, but also we need to go all the way up to board oversight. And most importantly, we need to make sure there is representation between, at every part of the journey. Thank you for that, ladies. There's so much richness in this conversation, and I also know that in order for us to truly have that representation in every aspect, we need to, one, have that representation and be able to allow young girls and young women and even older women to be able to see themselves, right, and to have that support. And I think it would be important for us to talk about how have you all leveraged support in your careers, and any encouragement you can can give to anyone, whether they're in their mid-career or they are early in their journey, or perhaps looking for their first board seat. So I want you to think about that. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions for our panelists, please put those in the comments. We'll be opening it up for Q&A in a few minutes, but we want you to share some of the questions that you have. So who'd like to go first? How have you leveraged support?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, Kylie. One, I will say that I've been super blessed to have sponsors and mentors throughout my career that have helped me along the way. But I'll tell you that the one thing that really made a difference, and it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, particularly people who are coming up in corporate America. And when I started my career, I think I was trying to lean into being the best version of a white man that I could and trying to figure out why it wasn't working. And a light bulb went off when I took the role at Kimberly-Clark, where I said, you know what, I'm going to show up as my full authentic self, and I am going to be a Black woman every day when I come to work. I transitioned my hair to natural. I just started coming in with my full energy and just being who I am. And I was lucky to work at an organization, and now I definitely work at an organization that was very supportive of that. And so I think there's something about driving inclusivity in the culture of where you work. We can talk about pipeline programs and recruiting and getting young women, but if you're not building an inclusive culture within the organization that you are currently in, none of that even matters. You know, and today I get to walk into work and be unapologetically Black every single day at work and walk in my authenticity and drive results for the business. But what it's also done is made it very permissible for the rest of the organization to also be authentic, inclusive of people who are not Black women, which is a beautiful place to be when you think about an organizational culture. So I'll say above mentors and sponsors, it's just walking in the right culture of an organization that is accepting of being your authentic self. I want to encourage any young Black women watching this to start walking in who you are, because that is how we're going to make a difference. I do this every day to make a difference for young women behind me.
And you do it so well. Thank you, Lizette. Who else wants to chime in?
Kylie, I would love to actually just kind of piggyback on Lizette's comments, because for me, my journey began at IBM as an account executive, and I had a client director, and I don't mind sharing his name because he knows how I feel about him, Alex Shootman. And the reason he knows that I feel like he is someone who represented for me and really set the stage for set the bar in terms of what I expected in other environments. Now, many failed to meet that bar, but as a white male, he identified, to Lizette's point, he created for our team and for his fellow client director peers, this is what inclusiveness looks like. He identified, he had a young Black female, and I was an account executive in the oil and gas industry. So it didn't even take all 5 fingers to count how many other Black account executives, or definitely Black female account executives, were in that space with me. As a matter of fact, there was only one. But he identified, what is this supposed to look like? How am I supposed to, I being him, right? How am I supposed to operate and engage and ensure that for the environment where I want her to recognize that regardless of her being the youngest, being Black and being female, this is where she will be successful. Because it's not just about the talent that she's bringing, but it's about the culture that we're creating here in this small microcosm that we have in Houston, Texas, for IBM. And also to Lizette's point, right, that's one of the things for ITSMF I want to call out, right? When working with ITSMF, and we would work with corporations and they would have these conversations with us and they would give themselves laurels around their recruitment strategies, our counter would be, got it, understand, but let's talk about your retention strategies. Let's talk about the culture you have here, because what you're really doing is setting up recruitment for a revolving door, rather than setting up recruitment that will actually retain the talent that you fought so hard to bring in the door. So I just wanted to piggyback on that in terms of a personal reference, in terms of my career journey. as well as just, again, speaking to having champions, right? Like organizations like Beyond this, Beyond the Suit and ITSMF, and just organizations, you all make a difference. And really instilling in people from that leadership level that Nicole talked about, that governance level that Nicole talked about, having those conversations, having those difficult conversations, and making it known that you have to be intentional about this. Like, this is not for the faint at heart. This is not for those who are looking to be trendy. This is not for those who are looking to hit numbers. It requires work to really ensure that you're changing culture and changing narratives, or else you're doing a disservice at the end of the day. And it just makes a big difference. So I just wanted to share, but also really kind of piggyback on great points that have already been made.
Thank you so much for that, Erica. Regina or Nicole, anything to add?
I'll add to that. It's interesting because I think we've had similar experiences, even though our backgrounds and what we've pursued has been very different. But when Lizette talked about, trying to be someone else, I too did that and made that mistake early on in my career. And it wasn't necessarily to emulate being a white male, but there was an environment in an organization where I couldn't find myself. And I tried very hard for a while to be a part of something that wasn't me, like this organization, changing the way that I think, changing the way that I approach things so that I could be more like the norm. And when that light bulb went off, that said, you know what, you're really good at understanding technology risk and being able to see around the corner and help guide organizations. That's who you are, and that's what you bring to the table. Embrace your strengths. And then find ways to have those conversations and finding ways to have others that can be your sponsor and your champion, and helping to elevate your voice. Now, all of that sounds simple, and that work was hard. And everyone here on that panel has an appreciation for what that probably meant, right? And the time and the amount of effort we put into making those things hold true. But that moment of realizing that I could be myself was so freeing. And from there, it changed the way that I looked at opportunity. It changed the way that I sought opportunity. It changed the way that I screened for opportunity. It changed the way that I built partnerships. And look, I've had some fabulous people in my network and my environment that's been very supportive of me, that help amplify my voice. And, Erica mentioned ITSMF, and I'll mention them again too, because when we see the numbers becoming increasingly smaller, right? The higher you are in an organization, we need platforms such as this, and partnerships with organizations like ITSMF to help give us a voice, right? And bring light to our perspectives. But it also meant having those same really hard conversations in our organization, to make sure that the organization is as committed to you as you are to the organization.
And I'll I guess wrap it up and offer a perspective from the entrepreneur's point of view. One thing that has definitely helped me have been other entrepreneurs. When I think about support, what does support look like? It's very lonely when you are building a business, and you're the CEO, and all the decisions come to you, and you have to project this sense of confidence and vision all the time, and you feel as if you don't have any room to fail. Guess what? I have failed publicly. I have failed multiple times, and yet I'm still here. And I have to say that I credit that to being able to pick up the phone, talk to another entrepreneur, and cry, scream, be mad, be angry, and have her say, "Yeah, I did that last week." Just to understand that you're not alone, that this challenge and this journey is extremely hard. And someone mentioned entrepreneurship is also not for the faint of heart, but it's also so amazing how much I've learned from other entrepreneurs along this journey. I too started off in corporate America. I was in management consulting after graduating from Kellogg, and definitely understand the support that's needed from mentors and sponsors. But as I transitioned into entrepreneurship, it's been the peer-to-peer mentoring and the peer-to-peer support that I think has been immensely valuable, and something that I want to just call out, that sometimes you learn from like your colleagues, sometimes more so than the folks that you're trying to reach.
Absolutely. There is so much power in community. And in these entrepreneurship streets, Regina, it is tough. And I've told people, as an entrepreneur, all of your stuff comes to surface. Like anything you have not resolved or healed, it will emerge in entrepreneurship. So having that tribe of people is so important, whether you are in a corporate environment or you are leading your own entrepreneurial efforts. So thank you for that. Well, I don't see any questions from our audience, and I know that we're nearing our end, and I thought it could be good for us to end with a question around legacy and what you would like your legacy to be. So today we've talked about imagining a world where Black women were at the helm of leadership. We've talked about representation. We've talked about, the power of seeing ourselves. And I mean, we didn't even get into representation in the media with, the power of movies like Hidden Figures and Black Panther and what they've meant. But each and every one of you is leaving a legacy. You are leaving a legacy. So when you think about the legacy that you are leaving, particularly when it comes to Black women in technology, what do you hope for it to be? So whomever would like to start first.
Since I went last time, I'll go first this time, because the minute you asked that question, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I want to build wealth, generational wealth for Black and brown families. Period. The end. We are dealing with being about 500 years or so, almost 500 years behind, right? Like, so we're not at the starting point. And if we think about the ways to leapfrog, how can we leapfrog centuries of, dehumanization, oppression, institutional racism and discrimination? There has to be some ways that we try to bite, that we try to chip away at that. And I wholeheartedly believe that entrepreneurship is one of those ways. You can get into real estate. You can pursue careers. You can invest in stocks and bonds. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I'm very, very passionate about leveraging entrepreneurship because it's also connected to ownership, right? So we own the things that we're building. We own the things that we are, that we're monetizing. As again, arbiters of culture, we want to monetize that culture. And so if I think about the ways that we do that through entrepreneurship, it provides a lasting opportunity to build generational wealth, not just for ourselves, but for that legacy and for those families and for those other generations to come. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That is the thing that I've seen start to happen within our organization, and the businesses that these women are building are phenomenal. It's powerful, and it's a radical act to convene Black women to talk about wealth. And that's something that I'm really humbled and excited to do.
Beautiful. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Well, Kylie, before I answer that question for myself, I'd like to shout out you, and I want to thank you because through the Asbury Group and through Beyond the Business Suit, you're helping and really encouraging just a legion of women to identify just the answer to that question. And so, I'm a big person of giving people their flowers while they're living. And just as you've brought leadership to this conversation, you do this every day. So I wanted to say that around the legacy that you're creating for so many women, helping them to acknowledge that for themselves and to say thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, my friend. And then I would say for myself, I'm actually going to pull from a quote from Angela Davis. She has this quote that I love that says, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept." So when people think about me and when people remember me, I want them to remember me as being someone who has always or will always be, maybe even that extreme advocate, not just the advocate, but that extreme advocate, that change agent, that person that has been a disruptor, that has pushed the envelope, that has questioned and held people accountable, because there's just so much more that still needs to be done. Um, and that's not always good, right? When people associate those characterizations to you, but I'm okay with that. And I'm willing to embrace that and accept that, particularly if it means that change is happening, particularly if it means that opportunities are being created, because what we know that talent is ubiquitous, but opportunities are not. So if it means that I need to be that to change that status, I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with people remembering me as such, because it means that somebody else benefited as a result of it.
I love it.
I love that, Erica. I'm gonna steal a page out of that book because it's very much aligned to my legacy and what I hope to leave behind. And I think I walk in this every day. When people ask me like, what is my superpower? What has made me successful and rise through the ranks and everything? It's not my Ivy League degrees or Kellogg or all this experience. I also was an IBM employee at one point. It's my Black girl magic. Like the thing that is inside of me, and it's been on 2 performance reviews at 2 different companies, is that I'm bringing swag and substance every time I walk into a meeting. And that is rooted in our ancestry. Like literally my superpower to navigate and do what I need to do well, it's rooted in resilience. So where did resilience come from? That came from our people. I'm leaning against that hard. Forget about Columbia, London School of Economics, all that stuff. I'm leaning against being a Black female in America every day when I get up and try to navigate corporate structures, champion ideas, fight for my team, and get things pushed through to grow a business. So when I think about my legacy, I want it to be permissible for other young Black women to look at me and be like, wow, she's winning using her Black girl magic, not as a sub bullet, but that's the primary way that she's walking in and navigating. And it's okay for me to be that, and for me to be who I am, and to be authentic in my approach and celebrate that part of me every single day, because that means I'm going to win. And if there's a young lady looking at me and they can see that, then my legacy is already being upheld.
Yes. And Nicole, the final word.
It's so empowering to hear everything that's come before me, but just 2 words, helping people increase their social capital and social mobility. And so when I think about the influence that's required and those connected networks and tissues, I've been known for not only having a network, but leveraging my network and really reaching in to create opportunity for that next generation. Social capital is so important in terms of the influence that comes out of it, right? And not just as a means to get by, but as that means to lead ahead. So I'll close with social capital and social mobility being part of my legacy.
Beautiful. Well, you all are establishing your legacy in everything that you do and who you are each and every day. So thank you. Thank you. I know that we had one question around from a corporate recruiter who wants to know some authentic ways to connect with Black women in STEM. I would encourage you to connect with ITSMF. And this, I mean, this organization is created for Black people in technology. So certainly make sure that you're connected, Dion, if you are not already. I want to thank you all. I want to thank our esteemed panelists for being a part of this discussion. Erica, Regina, Lizette, and Nicole, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your powerful insights today, and for all that you do to create a legacy that you are establishing in this world. I know I am inspired. I'm feeling great. I also have a few things that I want to share with all of us before we end today. First, this conversation will be featured in an upcoming upcoming episode of the Beyond the Business Suit podcast, which you can find wherever you find your podcasts, or you can go to beyondthebusinesssuit.com. And if you're interested in learning more about the work that we do at the Asbury Group in transformational leadership development, especially for women, then please check us out at groupasbury.com. That's GROUPASBURY.com, as you see on the page here. And then also, if you would like to learn more about ITSMF, go to ITSMFleaders.org. And if you are interested in learning more about ITSMF membership, then you can reach out to membership at ITSMFleaders.org, and you can learn more about membership. ITSMF's S1 Symposium is taking place in Atlanta and virtually, so it is a hybrid event, March 31st through April 2nd. And let me tell you, this symposium is nothing like you've ever experienced before. If you have not experienced it before, imagine a family reunion meets technology conference. We talked about the power of community today, and this is one where you can connect with family. We say at ITSMF really means it's my family. So registration is open now, and early bird registration and ITSMF special rates for the hotel end Thursday, March 10th, and registrations are going fast. So please check out ITSMFleaders.org for more information. We will also be joined by comedian, Emmy and NAACP Image Award-winning talk show host and STEM advocate, Lonnie Love, who is our keynote speaker. And in case you're interested, for those who are interested in attending live, there will be limited seating due to COVID restrictions, as well as COVID testing on site. So we want to make sure everyone is as safe as possible. And there's also virtual attendance available. Earlier, I mentioned that I lead ITSMF's Emerge Academy, which is a 10-month transformational leadership development program for women of color in technology. Applications are open right now until April 30th. And that's for the class of 2023, which kicks off in August. You can find more about that at ITSMFleaders.org in the offering section, as you see on the screen right here. And that is all from me. We do have one more thing. I would love to invite our ITSMF president and CEO, Johanna Jones, in for our final words. So thank you all so much for joining us on this International Women's Day.
Maya Angelou says most poetically, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. But on this International Women's Day, I say to you, I come as one and I stand as 3.9 billion. I stand with 3.9 billion women throughout the world. Today, we see greater emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. True equity for women means barrier-free access to the highest quality of healthcare. True equity for women means barrier-free access to the highest quality of education. True equity for women means barrier-free access to wealth-building opportunities. And notice that I said wealth-building opportunities. We like to teach men to fish, but we need to teach women to fly. STEM education, STEM careers, technology entrepreneurship are some of the most promising pathways to eliminating barriers and ensuring that women have access to wealth-building career opportunities. Organizations like IT Senior Management Forum are designed to eliminate those barriers. Our leadership development programs focus on the skills and assets and attributes that are not taught in business school. We provide networking opportunities and access to women and leaders of color so that they can reach the C-suite and connect with other senior technologists that are most willing to provide mentorship, provide sponsorship, and ensure that women and leaders of color reach the highest levels of leadership and technology in Fortune 500, 150 companies. On this International Women's Day, I invite you to join the ITSMF family. Our Merge Academy is currently accepting applications. We are also accepting registrations for our upcoming first symposium of the year in Atlanta, Georgia, March 31st through April 2nd. And in addition to that, we are always looking for qualified members in technology to join the ITSMF family. Please visit our website at itsmfleaders.org to learn more information about our Merge Academy, about our upcoming symposium, and about membership in ITSMF. Thank you.